Welcome. My name is Grandma Storm. I write stories for young adults. Today I am reading chapters 81 through 85 in my book, The Book of Faith. '81. So pretty. Faith looked up from her work of skinning rats to see the old ones staring at her. Faith returned the toothless grin with a polite nod. Faith glanced at Tirzah. She was getting some instructions from Cook. The old one had been scrubbing pots, but now she stood, gazing at the little girl. Their eyes met. My name is Faith. What is your name? Mara, was the reply. Mara reached out her hand and touched Faith's cheek. Faith saw a tear tracing its way down the furrows of Mara's gray cheek. So pretty. Get back to work, screamed Cook as she barreled across the room. Her hand drew back and smacked Mara, knocking her to the floor. Mara was unfazed, her eyes still on Faith. Cook stood over the old woman, screaming oaths. Mara gathered her bones together and stood. She staggered across the floor. She made it back to the sink and resumed her work. Faith turned away, a tear tracing its way down her own cheek. After the brown leather locked the barracks that night, after the usual noises of sleep confirmed there was no one to awake to hear them, Faith whispered to Tirzah, "Her name is Mara." What? Mara, the one that says, "So pretty." Stay away from her. Did you see Cook smack her? I don't know why Cook didn't hit you. Tirzah changed the subject. Ashiel was able to talk to me for a few minutes before class, he says. Faith drifted off to sleep. She dreamt about mugs of warm milk and hot baths. It was tragic to wake in the morning to hunger and filth. She dug in her pocket for the rock. As always, it sprang open, revealing a fresh cake. This morning, she broke it ever so carefully into 4 pieces. The one she portioned for herself, she made smaller than usual. The ones for Tirzah and Ashiel were almost the same as always. She hoped they would not notice. It wasn't that she wanted to deceive them. It was just that she thought it was right to share with Mara. The old one was so thin and sad. This was a kindness she could do in this horrid place. Faith slowly chewed her portion. She slipped the piece she intended for Mara in a pocket. Tirzah stirred and opened her eyes. Faith greeted her friend with a smile and held out a piece of cake. Tirzah let it dissolve in her tongue, allowing its life-giving strength to fill her. The lock jiggled in the door. The brown leather yelled for roll call. Another day in the dear Queen's royal camps for re-education and perfecting of enlightenment began. 82. So pretty. Faith turned to see the old ones standing beside her. They were in line for the last bowl of soup of the day. Hello, Mara. I have something for you. The old woman grinned her toothless smile at the child. Faith reached in her pocket and pulled out the bit of cake she had saved for the old one. Take, eat. This is given for you. Mara took the cake but did not eat it. She slipped it somewhere into her tatters. No, Mara, eat it. So pretty. The line lurched ahead. Faith received a bowl of soup. She could tell from the smell that the bits floating in the tepid water were minced mice. She hurried to her spot beside Tirzah. Faith glanced around looking for Mara, but she was gone. Mara left the mess hall and hurried to the officers' quarters, where she was admitted. Skiva took her to an empty office. About time. I'd been waiting impatiently for your report. Yes, my lord. Well, what have you learned? Mara said nothing, but held out her hand. In it was the cake Faith had given her. What is this? Your Eminence, the little girl gave it to me. Where did she get it? She has it every day. I do not know where she gets it. Stolen? Perhaps, my master. Skiva took it, broke off a crumb, and put it in his mouth. His eyes opened wide. He wanted to shove the whole thing in his mouth, but he overruled the temptation. He needed it for evidence. With a grimace and trembling fingers, he put the cake on the table behind him. Did you eat any of this? No, my lord. Do you have anything else to report? The little girl gives some every day to the one named Tirzah. She also gives a piece to the boy, Ashiel, at class. They think no one sees, but they are clumsy and trusting. Skiva began pacing. He needed to think what this next move should be. Mara stood with her head bowed. Skiva stopped and demanded, What are you still doing here? He went back to pacing. Mara turned to leave, but her eye drifted to the cake on the table. She reached out her hand. Skiva spun around and laughed, his big teeth framed by thin lips. Who else is clumsy and trusting? You fool, you old fool. Forgive me, sire. You have no right to touch that cake. It is evidence. Are you trying to tamper with justice? I need this physical proof to pursue prosecution. And you, in the dear Queen's realm, even in the dear Queen's camps, there is no room for criminals or the insane. Yes, the criminally insane. That is what you are. Guard! A brown leather appeared. Take this woman to detention and chain her. She is dangerous. A strong hand gripped Mara by the arm and hustled her away. Skiva was presenting a talk as a guest lecturer that night. It would be bad form to be late. The title of his talk was The Dear Queen's Famous Species, the Arachnid. He walked out and closed the door. He felt good. Things were going his way at last. He breathed deeply, the night air filling his lungs as he strolled to the lecture hall. The cake on the table was not neglected. A rat ran up the table and carried it away. 83. Skiva lay wrapped in a blanket, gazing at the stars and chewing rat jerky. After months of intensive effort, this return trip to Topeth was like a holiday hike. He sighed. The trick was to recognize and to capitalize on opportunities. He put his hand in his pocket and pulled out the treasure. A pearl of great price gleamed in the starlight. The night chill seeped into the blanket. He shoved the pearl back and rolled tighter, pulling a fold of the blanket over his head. With the starlight shut out, darkness filled his mind. He remembered that night, that wonderful black night. After he ordered a brown leather to drag Mara away in chains, he arrived on time to deliver the lecture. He was the guest speaker. His topic, the dear Queen's favorite species, the arachnid. He strode forward to take his place behind the podium. All the staff, brown leathers, and keeper of the dear Queen's royal camps for re-education and perfecting of enlightenment were seated waiting for the lecture to begin. The campers stood in their proper places. Only Mara was missing. She was locked away. A rock poked his back. He shifted. His lecture on spiders was given with the insight of one identifying personally with the creatures. What a waste before that audience. He could have had a dazzling career as a professor. Perhaps when he reestablished himself in the good graces of the Dear Queen, he would, in his leisure hours, offer lectures at the Dear Queen's University. She seemed to like the intellectual type. Didn't she surround herself with those decrepit scholars and Dr. Luce? Dr. Skiva. The syllables presented a pleasing cadence. Ah, yes, all were in their proper places. There stood among the campers the mirror and her boyfriend, Ashiel. Ha! When he thought of their fate, it swelled his chest with pride. The mirror was not so haughty now. The Dear Queen's young scholar was not so superior now. The traitors were dead, 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 dead. Ha! Oh, and Faith, she was dead too. But before she died, she paid for all his trouble, escorting her through the caves, getting her to Topeth, and for the presentation before the royal court. She was never grateful that she had placed the pearl in his hand. Then she died. The traitors were all dead because of their decisive actions on behalf of the honor of the Dear Queen. Did not institutions award doctorates based on the accomplishment of great deeds? It would be convenient to skip dreary years of study. He would be willing to accept an honorary doctorate. One needed to know when to gracefully set aside one's pride and accept gifts and honors. Humbly, of course. A minor point would be to discuss the deficiency of the Dear Queen's royal camps for re-education and perfecting of enlightenment, if he brought it up at all. He would play that card if he needed it. He would be a fount of wisdom and progressive insight. The Dear Queen might even elevate him above Dr. Luce. Ah, yes, the glorious night. As he was concluding his lecture before the assembled camp, he said, "Beyond the glorification of the Dear Queen and her most beloved species, the spider," he paused. He stretched his bony fingers over the top of the podium. Eyes that had glazed over refocused and looked at him with wary attention. He felt a nudge, but knew no one was near him. The darkness was urging him to act. That dreaded futures contract came to mind. The brown leathers tensed. The keeper shifted in his seat. Cook restrained a belch. Skiva licked his lips. With a low voice, he began, "I wish to deliver my findings before the assembled camp. The Dear Queen sent me here to investigate suspected deficiencies." The keeper coughed. "Sir, that was a wonderful lecture. I am sure we are all enlightened now on the Dear Queen's predilection for arachnids. How extraordinary this is to hear from a member of the court at Topeth." "Sir," blazed an indignant Skiva, "you will not stop me from speaking the truth. My full report goes with me tomorrow. All the world will know. You might as well know now." "Sit down, I say," sputtered the keeper. "Purity, truth, justice," Skiva intoned, raising his eyes and stretching his arms to the rafters. "The glory of the Dear Queen." The keeper hesitated. Skiva returned to the assembly. "I stand before you as an agent of change, change for the good of this camp, change for the elevation of the Dear Queen. Skiva paused in his remembrance. Wrapped in the blanket with rat jerky stuck between his big teeth, he gave himself a loving hug. He should have taken his talents to the theatrical stage. "Sir," the keeper began as he rushed to the podium, "I say, is this the time and the place? Think, man!" "Brown leathers, restrain him," Skiva commanded. Which one possessed the higher rank? Glances bounced about the room. One brown leather advanced and took the keeper by the arm. "Perhaps, sir," said the brown leather, "you had better sit." With a heavy hand on his shoulder, the keeper sat. "This is unbelievable," the keeper objected. Skiva's voice rose as he continued. "In this camp, criminals receive the finest re-education. But are they grateful? No. Do they change their ways and exalt the dear queen? No." His eyes glistened, his back straightened, his bony finger pointed at the rank of campers. "Traitors, criminals, madmen!" Skiva screamed. "Why do you burden the dear queen and squander her magnanimous munificence?" Campers shifted in their places. Staff members eyed the accents. Brown leathers moved to guard the doors. Skiva's voice climbed to a piercing pitch. "Why do you resist enlightenment?" Skiva paused, swung to the keeper, and gazed with pity upon the man. "You do not know." Skiva's voice dropped low. "It is not all your fault. You do so much with so little. You, keeper, have my sympathy. I assign blame to those under you, but that must not stop me from being ever faithful to our dear queen. For her sake, we must set personal feelings aside and live only for truth." Skiva drew himself to his full skeletal height. In cold silence, he stared over the podium at the trembling campers. "I have uncovered 23 violations," proclaimed Skiva, pulling a paper from inside his shirt. "There are 11 flouted procedures." He waved the paper about. "Further, there is evidence of 7 proper camp practices ignored." The keeper of the dear Queen's royal camps for re-education and perfecting of enlightenment slumped in his chair. The campers stood stock still, not even sure if they should breathe. Skiva paused. He surveyed the room. He tucked the list into his shirt. Of course he was lying. The paper was blank. His voice dropped. "Tomorrow I leave. I return to Topeth with the report for the dear Queen and Dr. Luce. These irregularities will be dealt with in time through legal channels, but this night I have learned of outright treachery." "You," Skiva pointed at a brown leather, "bring me the prisoner, Mara." The guard glanced at the keeper, who nodded. The brown leather retrieved Mara, yanking her into the room. "Bring her here," growled Skiva. Mara was hustled to the podium. She stood below Skiva with her head down, her rags fluttering about her. Faith looked at the forlorn creature. Tears brimmed in the child's eyes. She thought, what did the old one do? "This woman is a traitor, a thief, and a rebel. She is dangerous, insane," spat Skiva, pointing a bony finger at her. "She betrayed fellow prisoners. She stole what is not hers. She lied to a direct confidant of the dear Queen." Mara's stooped form shrank. She lifted trembling hands to cover her face. "Confess!" Skiva screamed. "You possess stolen food. You told lies about your thievery. You hid treachery in your heart. Mara lifted her head, silently mouthing, "No." Her eyes turned to Faith. Skiva followed Mara's gaze. This was going better than he hoped. All he had to do was follow the drama. Perhaps this was the fulfillment of the futures contract. If the darkness did not desire Old Scratch, maybe this old woman would do. Future contracts were tricky. He made a mental note to avoid them in the future. The keeper, in an attempt to regain control, bowed to Skiva. "Sir, I most respectfully thank you for bringing to light these deficiencies of our camp. I am anxious to view this list. How can I do less than my best for the sake of the dear Queen, and the mission that she has entrusted to me as keeper of her royal camp for re-education and perfecting of enlightenment? Procedures will be reviewed with the entire staff. Practices will be updated. Truly, sir, I thank you." Skiva returned the bow with a true courtier's grace. The keeper made his way to the podium. Skiva stepped aside, allowing the keeper to address him, the pitiful assembly, and the cowering Mara. The keeper cleared his throat and proclaimed, "Further, I am in your debt, sir, regarding the treachery your most thorough investigation has uncovered. Please enlighten us all. Nobly you proclaimed purity, truth, justice. Truly, sir, we want nothing less than those principal qualities to inhabit all our hearts." Skiva allowed his teeth to appear at half power. "I see you have serious accusations against this woman," continued the keeper as he stepped aside. "Expose her faults so we may conclude this matter." Skiva retook the podium and began the narration. She spied on her fellow campers, betraying their confidence. She accused other campers of having food outside the generous provisions of the camp mess. Her past actions displayed crimes that only a woman of such depravity may stoop. A spy, a traitor, a psychopathic menace. "Enough!" The keeper signaled to a brown leather. "Take her to the pit and throw her in." Mara wailed. Her knees buckled and she fell to the floor. A brown leather grabbed her arm and dragged her to the door. Brown leathers marched the campers and the staff out of the lecture hall, across the camp, and to the pit. Mara whimpered. The campers were silent. The brown leathers were grim. The keeper and cook were bored. Skiva walked with a light step. He wanted to hum, but repressed it. Might not be good form. He felt in his bones that something to his advantage was yet to be realized. That futures contract might be paying off. The black pit materialized in the far corner of the camp. Its approaches slimed with mold and mud. A musty stench rose from the hole. Mara fell to her knees as a brown leather prepared to give the final shove. "Stop!" rang out a young voice. "I will buy her life." There was a collective gasp. Skiva smiled and said, "Stay the execution. Who spoke?" "I did," said Faith. "I have the price of a life in my pocket. The giants gave this to me. Anna said it is worth the price of a life. I will give it to you if you will spare Mara's life." Skiva was not going to allow strange revelations to prevent possible profit. "Give me that price," demanded Skiva. "Mara will not die?" "You have my word." Faith pulled from her pocket the wooden acorn protecting the pearl. She opened it, revealing the treasure. Skiva's eyes grew wide. The keeper leaned in to see what the girl was holding. "For the dear queen only," sneered Skiva to the keeper. The keeper, properly cowed, stepped back. Skiva held out his hand to the girl. Faith looked into his eyes and said, "I buy Mara's life. This pearl is the price of her life." With those words, she gave him the pearl. Lying in his blanket, Skiva rolled the pearl in his hand. He held it between his fingers and up to the glimmer of the stars to admire the pearl's luster. He had not spent hours lusting after other people's possessions to not know what this was worth. Portable and priceless, this was the perfect prize. He was now a wealthy man. The brown leather was not sure what had just transpired, but he released Mara. The old woman crawled to Faith. "Keeper, what say ye?" Skiva turned to the man and raised an eyebrow. "Throw her in," commanded the keeper. "What? Skiva said she would not die," exclaimed Faith. "He gave his word." "Well, you see I am overruled," shrugged Skiva. "This camp is not under my jurisdiction. You bought the life of the wrong man." "Throw the girl in as well," added the keeper. "A conspiracy is uncovered. I see now our dear queen sent us a savior. Skiva is here to cleanse our camp of the likes of these." Brown Leathers held back, unsure what to do. Cook came forward. "I'll do it. This will get rid of Two Mouth." "You filthy monster!" shrieked Tirzah. A brown leather slipped up behind her, catching both of her wrists. "Throw her in too?" Skiva suggested with a shrug. The keeper nodded. "Never!" Ashiel shouted, running to defend Tirzah. Skiva tripped the young scholar, sending him spinning into the pit. There was a splash, a struggle, and then nothing. Tirzah bit and kicked the brown leather. While she fought, Cook shoved Mara in. There was a splash, and then nothing. The brown leather released Tirzah. "I will not do this," he cried. "I will not have innocent blood on my hands." "Guards, throw this traitor and the girl in with the rest," Skiva screamed. The keeper was annoyed. A bothersome amount of paperwork was required to account for all these executions. He was tired of the drama. He was tired of the Skiva. He was sick of his job. Fewer campers meant less work. One less brown leather would make the others behave. "Throw them in." Faith was the last execution that night. In the confusion, she was knocked in the head before her little body was tossed into the pit. "Misery, misery," mumbled a witness. Skiva reflected what a comfort it was to be rich. When he returned to Topeth, his treasure would buy a lot. What would he get? A fine house? Influence? Maybe he would just hoard it. Maybe his treasure would be grand insurance against the proverbial rainy day. He thought about his bag of gold. Too bad he neglected to get a receipt. As he walked the next day, Skiva wondered if the tailor had fixed the red spiders at the collar as specified. After what he had been through, he needed a new pair of pants. He would order 2 pair and collect the coat from the tailor. The man better have that bag of gold, but in a way it did not matter. Not in proportion, anyway. He rolled the treasure in his hand. He took it out to admire it. So pretty. The frost was gone. Travel was easy. He was not in a hurry. Time was his friend. Time would dull the memories of his little transgressions. The dear queen was forgetful. He was sure he could charm his way to be her spider once more. Be clever, my boy, hissed Skiva to no one at all. Be artful. Be a dancer, a prancer, maybe even a romancer. That thought made him laugh out loud. He was cresting a hill when he heard the staccato beat of hoofs. A brown leather was rapidly approaching on horseback. Should he hide, or should he hail the man? Hiding was safer. Like a spider, Skiva scurried away and crouched in the shadows of the forest floor. Horse and rider galloped past. Skiva resumed his tramp to Topeth. No hurry. Time was on his side. His hand sought the treasure again. It was still in his pocket. He smiled, just as he had desired. That girl was the making of his fortune. That was all in the past. Skiva's future lay before him. A pearl of great price resided in his pocket. He yawned as he curled up in the blanket. Maybe he would be knighted and a doctor. Sir Dr. Skiva. Then his mother would love him. 84. When Faith hit the water, she missed the rope. Of course she did not know it was there. As she sank below black slime, a strong hand found her, slipped a loop under her arms, and pulled. As he did every night, the man sat in his secret tunnel, just above the water line of the deep pit. He called it fishing. He was not casting for real fish in that slop of slime. Nothing worth harvesting lived in that muck. He was fishing for men. He knew the habits of the camp. He knew executions took place as night was falling. He did not bring back a catch every night, but tonight he fished 5 out of the pit. Moreover, he knew 3 of these fish. Ashiel, Mara, Tirzah, a brown leather, and Faith were hauled out of the black water and into the sloping tunnel. The men stooped, coughing to clear their lungs. Tirzah was on her knees, retching. Mara lay moaning. Faith was unresponsive. Ashiel, pick up the old woman and follow me, ordered the man. Now. How do you know my name? Rasped the youth, obeying as he found the bundle of wet rags. That was Mara. Without replying, he spoke to the brown leather. Sam, help Tirzah. I will carry the little one. How do you know my name? Who are you? Stammered the brown leather named Sam. Aren't you going to thank me for saving you from drowning in that pit? Queried the man as he scooped the child into his arm and began walking up the slope. Why, yes, of course, sputtered Ashiel. Where? Right, interrupted the man. Let's get the women out of here. Then you must forgive me, all of you. I will beg you to forgive me. Why should we forgive this man? How could he know Tirzah and me? Who was Sam? Where was he taking us? Puzzled a very confused Ashiel. The man pushed on a door. On the other side was light. It was only candles, but the eyes of the freshly executed were dazzled. Hands reached out, taking the child. Women dressed in white gowns came forward, leading Tirzah and Mara away to an adjoining room. The man swung around, directing Ashiel and Sam to another chamber. Wait, I do know you, murmured Ashiel as he saw the man's face. You are from my village. Manson? How did you get here? Wait, didn't you run away? Disappeared after Stranger left? You do remember Stranger? Yes, Ashiel, you do know me, said the man as he dropped to his knees before the lad. I am a traitor. I beg you to forgive me. You too, Sam. Many died or were enslaved because of my treachery. I left our village, our beautiful home by the sea, to tell that false queen of damnation about Stranger and the king he proclaimed. In my deception, I thought I would be rewarded. The man paused. Ashiel pondered the man who knelt before him and the confession he offered. Rise, spoke Ashiel softly. My mind is overwhelmed, but I fully forgive so ready a Savior. You know only part of my guilt, but I accept your pardon, for I so desperately need it. Come, Ashiel, and you too, continued Manson, motioning to Sam. A soft smile appeared on the soldier's mud-streaked face. He said, I forgive you. We are as filthy as men can get, said Manson, responding with a grin as he slapped Sam on the back. Hot baths and hot food await us. Let us not neglect those good gifts. Stop, said Ashiel, not willing to move as long as his mind demanded understanding. Where is Tirzah? Where is Faith? What happened to that old woman? They are in good hands, for tonight our troubles and theirs are set aside. You will see them in the morning. Stop, repeated Ashiel. Food and baths must wait. I must know how you came to be here. I will tell you all, began Manson, if you require it until this mud dries to rock. But if I can tell it while we three soak in tubs of hot water and soap, I think you will hear the story in more comfort. Ashiel agreed to Sam's relief that baths and talk would do. While recovering in hot water, suds, and salts, they learned that Manson had endured the camps until a single transgression of the innumerable rules sent him to the pit. Manson confessed, I did not care I was to die. I was never so sorry for my sin against the innocence of our village as when I was shoved into the pit. As I sank beneath the black waters, my last thought was, may the king forgive me. At that instant, I felt a rope slip under my arms, tug me to the surface, and pull me up the sloping tunnel. A man dressed in a glowing white garment stood before me and said, You are forgiven. I am forgiven, I said to him. The king has a purpose for you, he answered. You are to become a fisher of men. So I became a watchman at this pit, and in time, director of this place. It is a wayfaring station for those servants of the king who obey his commandments and are given work for his kingdom. It is a strange way to enter the kingdom, the service of the king, through deceit and despair. But I have learned many suffer through that dark portal. Come. Enough with the bath. I promised you hot food. Ashley had more questions, but Sam cut him short, saying, I'm starving. You can ask all the questions you want while I eat. 85. Faith stretched out her hand and felt something soft. Her head was on a pillow. It was good to be lying down. She must have slept. Am I dreaming? Faith murmured. It is like a dream, returned Tirza softly. Faith did not want to open her eyes. She dreamt she smelled fresh linen and lavender soap. She dreamt she was warm and clean. It was too wonderful. Any moment now, a brown leather would unlock the barracks door and scream roll call. She snuggled down, pulling the dreamy bedding up to her nose so she could smell the dreamy lavender. Then she smelled muffins. That was too much. She peeked in case reality was cruel and dreams were better. There sat Tirza. She was beautiful, like an angel. Faith decided she would risk losing her dream and opened her eyes. Tirza was dressed in a long white gown. Her hair hung about her golden and gleaming. In one hand was a mug with vapors lazily rising, and in the other hand was a fat muffin. Where am I? Manson's land. Manson's land? Who is Manson? A man from my village. It is a long story, but he is the reason Ashiel and I were kidnapped to Tophet. It is a terrible story, but all is forgiven now. He saved us. You, me, Ashiel, Mara, and a brown leather named Sam. You'll understand later. Right now, that is not as important as getting some food inside you. Do you think you can sit up? Faith sat up. Tirza handed her the mug and said, warm goat's milk. Just sip it. It was wonderful. Faith lay in a bed plump with pillows and comforters, all snowy white. The room was small, with white plaster walls and a pine board floor. High above was a little window. Blue sky filled the frame. After Faith ate a whole half a muffin and drank the whole mug of milk, Tirza suggested, maybe you should not eat any more just yet. Don't want to overdo it. Feel like you can get up? Is this heaven or a dream? Faith asked as she stood. It is not heaven or a dream, smiled Tirza, yet it feels like both. What do you say we explore this dreamy heaven? Yes. Faith saw she too was dressed in a white gown. Her hands ran down snowy fabric, marveling at how soft the material felt to her fingers. She touched the silver chain and key about her neck. How is it that I am clean? We were covered in muck and mud. Don't you remember the bathhouse? It was amazing. I simply adore bubbly soap and hot water. But then you did have a nasty knock on your head. Everything happened so fast. Tirza was going to continue, but Faith interrupted. Where is my cloak? I don't know. Tirza, we must find it. The child's voice rose. Faith, your clothes were ruined. My passport, my presents. Whatever are you talking about? Tears welled in Faith's eyes. Do you feel sick? Do you need to lay down? No, I must find my cloak. I don't understand, but let's go. They ran out to a wide hall. Open doors, sun-filled windows, and intersecting corridors offered too many options and not enough direction. Which way? Faith cried. I don't know, stammered Tirza. I heard our old clothes were burned. Let me find Ashiel, or better yet, Manson. Manson will know. At the word burned, Faith screamed. Tirza never knew Faith to be anything but level-headed. No matter how difficult things were, Faith was never given to hysterics. Manson! Manson! Tirza yelled as they ran down the hall. They turned a corner. colliding into a man. "Please, sir," Tirzah began. "Do not burn my clothes," pleaded a distraught Faith. Manson, gray-haired and tall, knelt, catching Faith by her shoulders. "I am sure you do not want those clothes anymore, nor anything you had in that camp. We gave you clean garments. You do not need to worry. You will not want for anything here." "You don't understand," Faith wailed. "It is the book and the scroll hidden in the pocket." He did not understand, but he responded to the distress in her eyes. "Follow me." Across halls and downstairs, they came at last to an open door leading to a boiler. Two men, white tunics kilted above their knees, pitched rags and wood into a fire. "Stop," Manson ordered. Startled, the two men turned to Manson and the girls. "Have you burnt the clothing that came from the camp?" Manson asked. "Yes," said one, a confused look on his face. "I think that was the first thing we did." "Are you sure? Clothing belonging to this little one," Manson said as he indicated Faith. I think so." Faith sunk to her knees. Then Philip's song filled her. "Words of wisdom, words of knowledge, these are gifts no man may steal. These gifts the Spirit will conceal." Still kneeling, Faith looked at Manson and said calmly, "Please have the men look again." Thank you for listening. To hear more of the story, please come back soon, or you may purchase your own copy on Amazon. Just follow the links below.